This is Dateline News and Conversation. My guest tonight, returning, Dean Henderson from South Dakota. He's the author of, I think, 7 books. I bought them all, read his most recent book, and we did a show a week or so ago um, that I think a lot of people had a hard time getting their head or their arms around these ancient royal bloodlines. We're not going to go there tonight. We're going to look at who and what have basically controlling the world for a couple hundred years, maybe more. So I'm welcoming back my good friend, Dean Henderson. Dean, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Regis, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
All right. So I don't know anyone, or I didn't know anyone except you, who educated me on what was really going on in terms of global power, global dominance, what's happening in the world. I read a book this weekend, and it got forwarded to me by a friend. The title is Conspirators Hierarchy: The Story of the Committee of 300 by Dr. John Coleman. Dean, I know you're familiar with this book. First of all, this book blew my mind. I have been wanting to know the names. Who are these people? In the Committee of 300, the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the Round Table, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in this incredible manuscript, 100, almost 200 pages, he listed pages of names, dead and still alive. Dean, first question, really simple. What do you know about this Dr. John Coleman?
Well, he was MI6 agent, and yeah, he started researching while he was working there, and found out a lot of stuff. That's one of the greatest books ever written, if you ask me. And everybody should get a copy of that somehow. And in fact, my first book, Big Oil and Their Bankers, which I first put out in 2005. I cited that book many times, and the thing he really, I think the one thing that stood out to me is he talked about this business roundtable, and I hadn't heard of it, and this was where Alfred Milner and Lord Rothschild, Lord Walter Rothschild, and Cecil Rhodes, and the Muckety Mucks, the Pilgrim Society, really is another name you could call this roundtable or bunch. But he pointed out how they sort of divided the planet up after the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, and a lot of things happened. The Russian Revolution happened, and then the Balfour Declaration happened, and which created Israel. And so this roundtable group was instrumental in all of these things. And not only that, but they literally farmed out, like America went to the Rockefellers and the Kuhn Loebs and the Morgans. South Africa went to the Rhodes and the Oppenheimers and the Rothschilds. Asia went to the Lee family and the Schiffs and the Singhs and the Pallavicinis, the Sikhs, and the Northern European countries and Central European countries went to the Warburgs, and the Lazard family got France, and they really carved up the whole planet. And as part of this operation, where the British Empire would go dark and go secret and pretend it didn't exist anymore, which it's still doing. And so he really pointed out just a number of things in the detail that he had in that book, and just the evidence, and similar to my big oil book, it's definitely the best research document as far as the 7 books I've written. Is my first one, Big Oil and Their Bankers, 950 footnotes, and I think Coleman had just many or more. And he saw the ins and outs of it, and so he lays it out in a way that's easy for people to understand. And he cites all of the aspects. The Tavistock Institute, he focuses on that a lot, which some people don't even know what it is, but it's part of the Royal Society. It's the um, social, what do they call it? Not even sure. It's like a social management, they call it, or something, and it's Tavistock Institute. But so that's instrumental in most of the mind control, including Hollywood. And he really delves into that, and he delves into the satanic stuff, and he just delves into a lot of areas, because he saw the inside. And he continued to speak until he passed away. When I back in the '90s, he spoke in Idaho. I was in Montana, and he came and spoke at a Militia of Montana conference, and because he tends to be more conservative in his political leanings, and or tended to be. So, but excellent book. And this committee at 300 that he's talking about, I had a list of the 2016 membership, and yeah, it's just all these names of, again, it's the bloodline names, and there's a sir or a count or a baron in front of most of them, prince in front of many of them, princess, high up in the titles, and the titles pretty much represent the rank of the order. So the Order of Garter is the highest order, and that's really just for they say there's 13 council members, probably, this number 13 gets thrown around. Some people say there's 13 bloodlines, but I kind of maintain that there's one bloodline, really. And they've interbred now to the point where there's just literally one bloodline. But so the Council of 13, or the 13 membership, this is the Order of Garter. This is the highest level. And it's an order for a reason, because everything they do is a pyramid structure with a hierarchy. And this is not a human concept, but we won't digress to that. But so the 13 administer this. Apparently, it's a council of 33, and again, these are pure bloodline people, insiders. It's probably going to be like some kings and some, Rothschilds, and heavy duty people. Then there's a committee of 300 under that, and the committee of 300 is also bloodline people. They're members of the royal families, members of the business, or their business consorts, or their privy council, because the privy council, they have one in each country where there's a monarchy, and the privy council tends to be your high-ranking business people and bankers and professors and things like this. And so the Privy Council administers the affairs in every country, and the Crown is active in every country. There's a few they're not welcome, but Eritrea comes to mind. But there's many more. I mean, there's it's not a total slam dunk. I mean, actually, this year, I think Guadalupe and Barbados voted to leave the Crown, to leave the Commonwealth. They call it the Commonwealth now, but it's actually the steal the wealth. And the Commonwealth is what remains of the British Empire, basically, or what officially remains above board and locked up, sewed up. They control it. Where they're not a crown like the United States, they have a hard time. They have to be more surreptitious, and they are, and this is the problem. But anyway, go back to that committee of 300, and yeah, these people are very powerful, and they pretty much steer things. And it's going to be a lot of the people that show up at your Bilderberger meetings, a lot of people that show up at the World Economic Forum meetings. And then when you get to the next level, it's that level and those groups. And then the Royal Societies become very important, because the Royal Societies as I think I mentioned in our last interview, initially the Crown bloodline hid behind the Catholic Church, and then they hid behind Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. And they said that was progress and that was great. But the most important thing that came out of that was Protestantism doesn't believe you have to do good actions to go to heaven or to transcend or to, maybe reincarnate into a bald eagle. Doesn't say that anymore. So, and then now it's gotten crazier with the evangelical movement and, Jesus is my savior. Poof, I go to heaven. And this is all just mind control. You can drive a pink Cadillac. You can be rich. You can live in a castle. Don't worry, Jesus wants you to be rich. These kind of crazy concepts, which this is all intelligence run now. CIA, Mossad, British intelligence, all these evangelical churches that are crazy like this at the highest levels are actually administered also because they use them in the field. They use them to soften up third world countries where they don't like the government still as missionaries. And increasingly, it's not Catholic missionaries, it's evangelical missionaries, it's evangelical churches. You go to places like Guatemala, where it's historically been, 90% Catholic, Latin America, and now it's all evangelical churches. They moved in to try to squash the guerrilla army of the poor, which had risen up after Arbenz was run out in 54 by the CIA and United Fruit. And there's these guerrilla movements, uprisings with the Mayan people and different Quechua, Queche, Cachiquel, different tribes in Guatemala rose up against the seven families, which is well known. There's, you go to Guatemala, you're riding a bus, you talk to somebody about the seven families, and they'll tell you all about it. I've had many people tell me about it in Guatemala. So this is the Privy Council, so to speak, in Guatemala, but it's actually not official because they're not part of the Commonwealth anymore. But it's surreptitiously happening because these certain bloodlines in these countries are essentially the Privy Council for the main bloodline. Then they put their money in offshore accounts administered by the Bank of England in the City of London. And so they recycle the Crown's money back to its banks, to it. And they all kind of work, and then they get to be corrupt and they get to retire in Miami, or whatever. But so, yeah, so you have this, essentially after they hid behind the Protestantism and the Catholic Church before that, then the Crown with William III began to hide behind science. And that's when the Freemasons became more out in the open again. The Templars had gone underground because, people were kind of onto them. And there was some issues with the Catholic Church too. So they still control the Catholic Church, or they try to, through the Knights of Malta. And the Knights of Malta is powerful. But before I get to that, so there's the Council of 300, then it's the Royal Societies, because now they're hiding behind science. So you have Chatham House, which is probably almost the epicenter of the whole thing, because that's the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which again, John Coleman, educated me about 25 years ago in his book. And so this Royal Institute of International Affairs is an umbrella organization, and under it is the Council on Foreign Relations in the United States, which people do talk about, and it's very powerful. And it was founded in the Pratt building, the Rockefeller-owned Pratt building. George Shultz was a Pratt, by the way, Reagan's Secretary of State, in the Pratt House in New York. And then they also control the Council on Foreign Relations in France, and the Australian Council on Foreign Relations, and the Canadian Council on Foreign Relations, and there's these branches of this RIIA, Royal Institute of International Affairs, everywhere. And so they basically institute the foreign policy and the mind control and all these psyops, which is constant low intensity warfare basically against the rest of the world, to convince us that colonialism and neocolonialism and their way of doing business, BlackRock and Vanguard in this country, is okay. And it's of course not okay. But so the Royal Societies become very important below the Committee of 300. But before you get to that, you have the Priory of Sion and the Rosicrucians. They're kind of wedged in between those levels, because their main mission is to hide the secret, the Sangreal secret. That's why they call it the Rosicrucians. It's the Red Cross. Okay, so the Red Cross What does that mean? Well, Elon Musk, X, came out with this new X, right? So triple X movies. So X, so Planet X, Nibiru. Babylonians first developed the significance of X on this planet that we know of, and all these X's. So what it means that they only know, and that we don't know, not too many of us anyway, but I know, is that it means the cross of the Anunnaki bloodline with the human bloodline. And so the Rosicrucians, the Red Cross, so they go into war zones and they're the intel, and they basically steal people's blood and then sell it to hospitals. So they really are vampires, because I know my wife needed some blood, and it was like $600 a pint. And then they want us to come in and give them this blood for free. And it's like the highest markup, biggest racket in the world is the blood industry. And so the Red Cross, of course, they're telling you they're great and they're saving lives and they're blah, blah, blah. And the people that work for them do good work, I'm sure. And most of them are sincere. Most of them do think they're doing a good job. But at the highest level, the Red Cross is all about blood. It's all about finding types of blood. It's all about, how do we even know, like, what is O negative as opposed to, can anybody tell me like the difference between blood? Because I'm asking, and I have no idea. And Ole Domgaard asked me the other day, we did an interview, and I was like, I have no idea either. And he didn't know. And who can tell me this? But these people are obsessed with blood, and there's a reason, because the sangreal, the royal blood, the purple blood, kind of bluish tint, Rh negative blood, which blue bloods, okay, they're blue bloods. Okay, so apparently the Rh negative, which they apparently have, is tinged a little bit in a blue way. And purple is the color of the House of Windsor. I mean, it's their coat of arms, purple. And all these things are just right there in front of us. And but it's really about the crossing. And then the priority of Scion is right there with them. And they're also guarding the secret. They're guarding the biggest secret, which is David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret. And that's what it's about. It's the biggest secret is the bloodline, is the blood. It's about the blood. It's about these are not human. And okay, people that want to go there, it's too bad, because it's true. We have to face it. So the Privy Council, or the alien administrators in all these countries, for the Committee of 300 say, but they're not as powerful as the Prior Zion or the Rosicrucians, which are kind of in between Committee of 300 and the Royal Societies. And that's their job, is just to protect the secret. Because see, Zionism doesn't mean anything you think it means. If you do etymology on it, it's a transliteration of Scion. And Scion, Scion, means what? It means to graft. To graft. So Zionism is just a culmination or a big part of the project to graft the bloodlines of humans and these, whatever you want to call them. You can call them AI. That suits me. If it makes you uncomfortable, you can call them Satan, if that's where you're coming from, But so this is the project. So anyway, below that is the Royal Societies. The RIIA is the most powerful, but in the Chatham House. Also very powerful is the Tavistock Institute, which, as I mentioned, they pretty much run Hollywood. Adolf Hitler was trained at the Tavistock Institute in I believe it was 21, took over and trained there. So Adolf Hitler was a project of the Crown, and they wanted to bring down Germany because Germany had better technology. They're, German technology, right? It's still well known. It's the best in the world. Probably Japanese pretty good too, but I mean, they're good at what they do. And the Crown on the British Isles saw this coming. The United Kingdom saw this coming, and they had to bring down the Germans. And they did it in World War I as well, by producing hyperinflation and bringing down Germany then too. And they always kind of want to keep Germany down. That's why they blew up the pipeline, not Russian natural gas to Germany. Who they put in peril? Germany. Not really Russia. Russia can ship oil anywhere, but they pretty much death sentence to Germany almost. I mean, if they couldn't have scrounged and got some fuel coming into winter like they did. But so they're doing it again. So also Mussolini. Mussolini was a project of the Savoy family. And the Savoy family is the old Italian monarchy that is officially deposed now. So the Royal Societies, the Tavistock's important. The Royal Geographic Society is really important, because the Royal Geographic Society is what instructs us falsely as to the nature of reality and the nature of who we are and our relationship with nature. So they always want to portray nature as this violent place because, their philosophers, Locke and Malthus and Thomas Hobbes, were all these dark, uh, cynical city people. And they were just talking about how, oh, the poor are eating too many resources. We may have to let them die. And I mean, things like this. And all these guys, all three of those guys were literally sponsored by the royal bloodline. One of them was a tutor to King William's son. One of them was they're all members of the royal. They were all members of the Royal Society. Another one was paid. His college was paid for by another prince or something. I mean, so they literally these Western philosophers, the bedrock of Western philosophy, still, to some degree, to this day, it was all sponsored by the crown, and that's the mind control. That's the beginning of when you can say this is the way you're supposed to think. So nature is portrayed as brutal and violent by the Royal Geographic Society, and there's all these men that just want to have sex, all these deer that run after each other, and it's just a free for all, and it's just not even true. Like deer mate once a year, whether it's the rut, the mating season, and they don't have sex outside of that time. And there's not a big scrum because I've watched it many times. I've grown up on a farm. I've watched, the boys chasing the girls. I've never seen a fight between the boys. They're always just all chasing the girls, and one of them just wins out, and that's the way it is. But it's not this big. And they'll sit there. These cameramen for Geographic, they'll sit there in Africa for like a month and wait for a lions to fight or whatever because it never happens. And then once in a while, a scrap of fat, and there it is. And I mean, they're just always trying to tell us that we're dark, that our nature's dark. We have original sin. We're bad. When nature's a scary, dark place, don't go camping. And this is the biggest. This is very important because this is the biggest thing they're doing to people that makes change and revolution and impossible almost because they've given us this dark view of things, and then you set the bar low, right? You're like, well, we're all screwed up anyway. Not much I can do about it. And it's just that whole mindset is counter-revolutionary. That whole mindset is not natural either. It's not the way humans think. It's not the way we look at things, perceive things. But the Royal Societies are there to put preconceptions into our heads, like particle physics, and which is just proving to be a total dead end, which any subatomic physics person would tell you now and does tell us now. And it's becoming almost mainstream finally that it's not about these tiny little particles. It's about plasma. It's about electricity. It's about not duality, but more polarity and together, working together instead of, butting heads, duality. That's the Freemason mantra, duality. And so it's really the bedrock, and that's why I try to do in this recent book, Royal Bloodline, with Tico and the Great Remembers. Now I talk about the bloodlines and who they are and the power structure, but what they've done to us and our preconceptions of reality. And when we have to throw all those preconceptions out and relearn everything by observing simply and being in nature and observing people and just using your own head. And it's a whole different way of looking at life, a whole different way of understanding things. And then you can be a revolutionary, and then you can realize we can do this, But so another one, the Royal Physics Society is the one that has pushed this particle physics theory. The Royal medical people have pushed Louis Pasteur and the whole vaccination concept on us without any. Pasteur had animals dying in his yard. I mean, it was unsuccessful, everything he did. And Jonas Salk was also sponsored by these people. So it's just on and on and on. These Royal Societies are very powerful in influencing the world and influencing, social things, anthropological finding things. All these things that really matter, they're the ones where they're pushing that out first, and people don't realize that. And so they're very powerful. The Illuminati is sort of maybe below them, and then they're just a wing really, because they're the super duper satanic bunch, and that they just openly are satanic. And I don't even want to get into the stuff they do, but Epstein, just think Epstein. and those people. And Epstein obviously was close to Prince Andrew, and so was Ghislaine Maxwell, very close, and her father, Robert Maxwell, very, very close to the crown, to Prince Charles and that bunch. And so anyway, and then it's just all about, below that, it's an operational. And the Knights of Malta, well, you'd have to put the Knights of Malta in there because they do, like I say, infiltrate the Catholic Church. And there's other orders that infiltrate other things. Knights of Malta have always been traditionally the Catholic faction of the bloodline. The Protestant faction is the Knights of Hospitality, or the Knights of St. John's, Jerusalem. And they're actually more powerful. And still, but they're now, it's interesting, they now have the same headquarters in Malta. They've kind of merged, and this is really significant because there's these two things that go back at least 1,000 years, more than that, like 1,400 years, I guess. And they've always been separate, or at least been more, not trying to believe they were, maybe just trying to make us believe they were separate and more strenuous about it. Now they've just flat moved into the same headquarters in Malta. And that just happened. So that's interesting. And they just, under them, you have the different secret societies. The Freemasons are the Western world, secret society. The Kabbalists are important in the Jewish tradition. They infiltrated that, and the Torah is kind of the good Jewish book, and then the Talmud is the Babylonian kind of Kabbalist book, and it's pretty evil, really, and fake Judaism. It's just Satanism, really. And then in the Muslim world, you have the Muslim Brotherhood, which is headquartered in Aramco headquarters in Saudi Arabia. And Aramco, of course, is the company that the Four Horsemen started, Royal Dutch Shell. Well, Chevron Texaco started it, and then, ExxonMobil became part of it, and then Royal Dutch Shell and BP. And they claim to have nationalized it, the Saudis. But again, I've seen documents after they said they nationalized it that said ExxonMobil still owned like 28% of it. So anyway, the Muslim Brotherhood is headquartered there. The U.S. Freemasons, sort of Charleston, South Carolina, New Orleans. The mafia came out of the Freemasons. The same bunch was the New Orleans Mafia, Carlos Marcello. It's the same bunch. So the St. John Jerusalem and the Knights of Malta, they also administer the mafia. And the mafia, the Corsini family, the Brandini family, there's several old black nobility Italian families, bloodline, who are literally the mafia bosses. Oticelli family is a big one. And the Gambinos, and they actually, they are the mafia, and the Freemasons and the mafia, they're pretty much, and the Ku Klux Klan are all sort of the same thing. It's all Royal Society, Knights of Malta, Knights of St. John Jerusalem administered. And the Red Cross actually is all the people that run the Red Cross that are executives are Knights of St. John's Jerusalem or Knights of Malta. All of them. And it's in my big oil book. I got it all documented, name and names. And they're very close to HSBC Bank, that bunch, because they're the ones that have always run the smack into Vancouver, the heroin, through Chinatowns. They use Chinatowns all over the world to run their heroin. That's why you see Chinatowns everywhere. That's the main reason, because it's run by the Triads, which is the Chinese Freemasons, that they kind of created during the Opium Wars, but they probably existed before that in some other form under the Li family, which is the powerful bloodline that runs China. So yeah, then you have just operational level, and then the Masons. Okay, so they run kind of banking, politics, business, corporations. In the U.S., they do their facades, their fake charities where they abuse children. St. Jude's is one of them. Don't give them any money. Yeah. So they do a facade. They have parades and circuses, and that, it's as a reason for that, because bread and circuses, because it's a distraction, right? So it's just like the Crown always does the same thing. They have to sip tea. They have to wear these fine clothes. They have to march in a certain way, like they're really civilized or they're really whatever they're trying to pull here. But the reason they do that is because they're savages, and behind the scenes, they're abusing children, and they're drinking all day whiskey and just beating each other, and just it's horrible how these people actually live. You would be shocked. You would be shocked. But we've seen enough snippets of it over the years that we pretty much get the idea. Um, and then and that's pretty much, I would say, the operational level. Now some of the families, I say there's one bloodline. So Habsburg, Merovingian, both very powerful. Merovingians claim to come from the sea serpent called Oannes. Who knows? Um, Habsburgs, Plantagenets, Bourbons, very powerful. That's where we get to drink bourbon. They're really into alcohol. These people, alcohol is a bad thing. Don't do much of it. I drink very sparingly, and it's just bad. The Seagram's brand is owned by the Bronfman family in Canada. That's the Crown Privy Council pretty much in Canada. They own all the banks, Toronto Dominion, uh, and the Canadian banks are very instrumental in running and laundering the drug money, especially the Bank of Nova Scotia, which the Bronfmans also have a big chunk of, and the Rothschilds. But there's a four horsemen of Canadian banking too, and a four horsemen of U.S. banking for that matter. It's Wells Fargo, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and I mentioned the four in London last time, which is Barclays, HSBC, uh, Royal Bank of Scotland, and Lloyd's. And so there's these four horsemen everywhere. And but yeah, and then on down the line, they created corporations. They created the very concept so they could escape responsibility for polluting people's air and water and killing them on the job or whatever. It's a liability thing. They just it's a great corporation. So they created them, and then the East India Company, you could argue, was the world's first corporation. Even though it was just wholly owned by the crown, and the Dutch East India Company was actually before that, so they were probably the first. Some people say the Knights Templar were the first corporation, but I say they were the first bank, and the first credit card company, and the first issuer of bonds to countries and things like this. So East India was more of the mercantilism, the British mercantilism. So then, below that level, you have those tentacle corporations, and they've gone to hedge funds. So hedge funds will fund these really bad ideas, satanic ideas, whatever you want to call them, just taking us into the AI, just taking us away from nature, 5G, 6G, 7G, all this stuff. This cloud, this fourth industrial revolution that they talk about. And they fund all that through their hedge funds, and they're able to hide their money. They also, as I say, they hide their money offshore. So this bloodline uses the City of London, which is a 1 square mile separate jurisdiction, not part of London, not part of the UK. And they launder their money through the Bank of England, whether it's in the Cayman Islands, whether it's Bermuda, Bahamas, Vanuatu, doesn't matter. Whatever the offshore place is, that's just a little box hut to have an address, and it's all administered through the City of London. And the shareholders of these blind trusts in the Bank of England offshore, nobody knows their numbered accounts, so nobody knows the owners except the Bank of England. And my guess is very few people at the Bank of England as well. But it's all compartmentalized. But so that's how they. And then the crown corporations, I just saw a document the other day. The state of Israel is a crown corporation. The state of the United States is a crown corporation. And they've literally incorporated every country, too, to where we're corporations. So it's pretty, you get into that part, it's pretty crazy. But, and Jordan Maxwell is a person that's done a lot of research into that aspect. And if people don't know who he is, he's passed now, too, sadly. Great researcher, Jordan Maxwell. Check his stuff out. He's the one that pointed out that I caught that he said, you look at the landmass, Vladivostok, all the way to Namibia, say, on this way, and then Oslo to Singapore, the other way, on a cross. What's right in the middle? There's that cross again, Israel. Israel is right in the middle. So the Zionist project wants to merge, humans with the bad guys. Israel is supposed to be its headquarters. I've heard even just recently, the Jews that were in Aqsa Mosque the other day, the really ultra Orthodox Jews, talking about, oh, we have to build, we're going to build the third temple. And yeah, people like Jim Mars talked about this, how they're going to build this third temple. And that's, I think, the plan in Israel, because that's where they want their world government to be headquartered, their bloodline government. When they just finally come back out of the closet and go all medieval on our asses, and it's already happening. I call it electronic feudalism. But if you look at what's happening, things are kind of regressing into this medieval state in the West, and with the crown situation. Now the Russians have a counterpoint to that, hopefully a strong one, and maybe the Chinese, and the BRICS. But that's what they want to do anyway, is just take it back to medieval times, and that's why they're coming out of the closet. And you'll see a guy from Wells Fargo Bank talking on CNBC, and he's the CFO, and his last name's Massimo. It's the Massimo family. So, back to the bloodlines. Okay, so there's Massimos, there's Glucksbergs are big. The Rallos and the Glucksbergs are big bloodline names. Again, all same bloodline, and eventually, but they're the Nordic names. Wittelsbach, Hohenzollern, Von Turn Taxis. These are some of the Germanic, Würzburg. These are some of the Germanic central bloodline names. Then you get to Italy, and it's Savoy, and it's Aldobrandini, Corsini, Oticelli, De Medici, Banco. The Goths are part of the more northern part. The Plantagenets, the Tudors, a big part of the British, aspect. The Sinclairs also, or St. Clair's, is a very powerful bloodline. The Russells, the Freemans, the Collins, in the New World, I guess you'd say, the Li family, in China, the Singh family, Northern India, the the Khan family in Pakistan, Northern India, the Yamato family in Japan, the emperor, and even newer than that, the Al Saud clan in Saudi Arabia, the Al Thani clan in Qatar, all of the emirates, all of these different sultans and kings, and this is also the bloodline. So it just mushrooms out. They're all connected. And they're all related, and it's really stranger than fiction. I mean, but I've done 40 years of research on it, and every time I go deeper down the rabbit hole, it all connects. It's still connecting. It's still making sense. This thing that maybe I sensed when I was like 5 years old, that just a handful of people around the world, maybe you sensed it too. But I swear, the further down the hole you go, it does connect. And then you're like, wow. That's kind of the power structure. And then, of course, you got Hollywood, and below that, and they're brainwashing people with movies and, again, planting these preconceptions or these bad morals or these just dumb ways to think about things, in people's heads, and then making them miserable, making them hate themselves, making them narcissistic, making them shoppers, making them slaves. I quit working 27 years old. I quit buying when I was 18, pretty much. I have a very simple life. I still could fit everything in my car and move anywhere. You get possessed by possessions, they take over your life. And that's part of what they're trying to do here. Just bog you down, slow you down, keep your aspirations and your dreams at a very base level, keep you thinking linear, like everything's linear, when the native people knew it was all circle and karma every step, and everything comes back. And if you're good, it comes back. If you're bad, it comes back. So be good. It's logical. It's not woo woo. I'm a great person, and I'm going to virtue signal and tell you how great I am. I'm making, a green brand of pancake syrup or whatever. No, it's just about like every step of your life, like how you treat people everywhere, all the time, no matter who they are, and how you treat nature, and how you try to have a light footstep in this world, and don't pollute, and don't trash things, and just be respectful, and da da da. It's pretty simple. But everything they're teaching us, the movies and everything else, is just the opposite. Like Taylor Swift, I can do whatever I want, and all these young girls just following her like a cult figure. Like a, at some level, there's a matriarchy that controls a lot too, and people don't understand that. And some people even say the matriarchy is even more powerful. But right now, they're just trying to tear apart relationships by making these young girls all, Facebook narcissists. So I can do whatever I want. And I found out there's a branch of the Masons like called the Red Hats that actually pretty much preach that same thing. And they're these old women, and we can do whatever we want. And they wear red hats around and do weird things. And I mean, everything they do is for a reason. Everything they do is to dumb people down, divide people. They love divide and conquer. That's still their favorite tactic. So they give us the dual party system, which is way down the power chain, right? But it's just these people who are easily bought, who will do the bidding of the crown bloodline and corrupt. I mean, you have to be corrupt to win a major election in this country. That's so sad, but it's true. And I ran for election in 2004, and I won the Democratic primary in the state of Missouri, 8th district. And then I came up in the general election. I had raised 17 grand because I didn't accept PAC money from anybody. And I had all the wrong answers right away. When you start running for Congress, they send you all these questionnaires from like the Chamber of Commerce and all these powerful groups. They want to know where you come down on things. And of course, I got an F on everything, according to what their grading system, because I wouldn't, do what they wanted. And so I raised 17,000. She raised $1 million, and much of it from Budweiser, Walmart, Anheuser-Busch, whatever. Missouri, Anheuser-Busch, and Walmart, Arkansas, and a number of other huge corporations, Joanne Emerson, and 20-year, 30-year incumbent. People say we want change, but they never do, because all they had to do is just sit there and watch TV. And I couldn't afford one single ad because I had $17,000. A 30-second ad on a CBS station in St. Louis was $50,000. So I had like a third of what I needed for one 30-second ad, right, on TV. And she could just lob all these ads out, and we throw the bastards out. Yeah, right. And they never do. And this is still going on in America, where people complain. Congress has a 10% approval rating, and yet every single time they just watch TV, get mind controlled, vote for the most TV ads person or the cutest ad or whatever. This total mind control. Nothing about their platform, nothing about what they believe in, nothing about. So anyway, that's the Alice in Wonderland we live in, and that's all been created again by these royal societies and this crown and the way they seed us with ideas, and which is just to me more important even than the power structure or who controls who or whatever. They're all just crazy people. Who cares? Psychopaths. The minute we just deny them power over us and refuse to accept their ideas and refuse to accept their control, they'll go away. But too many people accept their control, and not only that, but help bolster their control. I call them the minions, and there are many. I don't know. I didn't want to put a percentage on, but it's a lot. It's a high percentage of people are minions, and they actually help reinforce the system. They're like deputized Crown Scout members, Yeah, and by the way, the Boy Scouts is part of their deal too, and the Girl Scouts, which is this huge scandal in the U.S. where there was all these children abused. Oh, really? I mean, so it's so insidious, and it's at every level, and they do this, but that's kind of the command structure. I think in a nutshell, and there's many more families that I'm not naming. It's hard to remember all of them, but in the end, just remember that it's really all bloodline, all one bloodline. I heard this on CNN. This is my source. I heard this on CNN. I suspected it already, but I heard it on CNN during the Queen's funeral, and they asked a royal biographer, some guy expert on royal, lineage. And they said, "So are all these kings and queens of Europe related then?" And he was like, "Yes, they're all related," just like that on CNN. And there it was, and there was the biggest secret. And how many people even heard that? How many people noticed that? How many people even heard it really? Because we're so conditioned not to hear it. But that's what he said, and so it is, and of course it is. So that's kind of the power structure, Regis. In my research, and again, I'm just tip of the iceberg here. Everybody's throwing in a lot of information right now. The black nobility is another bunch that's very powerful. They say ex crown, but I just think it's people who've been disgraced, probably pedophiles, and because this is just a road of carnage for 8,500 years. These people have abused humanity in so many different ways. And when you get again to the top bloodline families, they just live on yachts. They have 10 houses. They can do whatever they want, and they don't even administer. And that's why the 33 levels of masonry, right? So that's based on the vertebrae, because again, it's all about order, these orders, and we're the basically the oxen. So there's 33 vertebrae in the human back, then the atlas, right, and then the head, right? And so the Illuminati is considered the head, and I'd say the Committee 300 and all these, Priory and all this stuff, Priory Sion, Rosicrucians, even Council on 13, and then at the very top is the crown that sits on top of the head. And that's the idle rich. That's the people that have nothing to do all day, and they own all those shares in BlackRock and Vanguard, and they control crown corporations in over 200 countries. And it's just beyond belief, and that's what we're up against. Okay, so that's what we're up against, and so we have to continue to research the ties that the involvement of the British behind the scenes City of London crowd has on U.S. foreign policy, on Israeli policy, on Russia-Ukraine war. Why is it I'm always seeing throughout this war, I've seen most of the reports of all these bad things by the Russians have come from British intelligence or the British Department of whatever, and why on U.S. television am I seeing people commenting on the war, and they're from the Royal Institute of whatever, yeah, all the time, or the Atlantic Council, which is another one of their favorite. Atlantic, get it? Atlantic's between the U.S. and Britain. Special relationship. Special for who? Not for us, because all we get is debt and death and nothing. We're just a Hessianized mercenary force for this crown bloodline that is mostly in Europe, but again, all over the world, spread out. The Sultan of Brunei is part of it too. The King of Thailand is part of it too. There's vestiges of this still everywhere. This crazy way of thinking about things, and now, as I say, they're coming out of the closet. They're trying to come back, and you're seeing the bloodline names as actually administering things a little bit. The Khans, especially, very active lately. The Singhs, Singhs, very active. You just look for that name. Shah, the Palavacinis, the Shahs, Shaa. Look for that name. There's broadcasters on news stations with these names now. There's public health officials with these names now. The mayor of London is a Khan, and they're coming out of the closet and telling us that we're just going to rule you now because we have such control over all aspects of you, mainly your perceptions of reality, honestly. But after that, business, banking, politics, everything under control, no democracy. There really isn't. It's just you buy votes and do whatever you want. And people that are good candidates just get locked out or cheated on, like Bernie Sanders was cheated on. Or what they're doing to Robert Kennedy Jr., just ignoring him, just not even covering him in the media, not at all. And he's still got 22%. This could be an interesting election in 24. But anyway, I'll shut up, Regis, and let you ask another question because I'm probably hopefully that covers it.
Well, I want to establish a couple of things here. This Dr. John Coleman, you mentioned he was MI6. And in that manuscript, he talked about the CIA, MI6, Mossad, all these other intelligence groups are all part of the same structure.
Mm-hmm.
I I had heard about that, but the way he described it, and he described that was how he had access to all the documents
Mm-hmm.
that he's using to make his case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, I think on a future show, I want to get into a couple of other things, but you mentioned that this committee of 300, and Coleman in his book makes this very clear with numerous examples, how they control all the governments in the world. And if they don't have control of you, they will get control of you.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made it very clear that if you do not follow their agenda, you will be outed. And here in the United States, John Kennedy and Richard Nixon, the stories that Coleman told about Richard Nixon blew my mind. We'll get into that in the future because th- that that just changed everything that I
Yeah.
ever thought about Watergate and Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
I had no. We just all been brainwashed.
Been there. Yeah. Been there, done
The
that.
other thing, the other thing that I want to talk about, and you've mentioned it, is how they have been using mind control, and it's been going on for, I mean, more than decades. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they know how to do it. They perfected it. And one of the things that he pointed out was all of these fads, all of these trends, all of these cults, all of this new stuff didn't just happen. It was part of their plan to change us and to change society.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
thought, wow. The other thing that really blew my mind, and I want to talk about this in the future, is how big Henry Kissinger and Zbigniew Brzezinski were
Mm-hmm.
to the Committee of 300. The
Yeah.
power that they wielded, not only in the United States, but around the world.
Yeah. George Soros is the current reincarnation of those two, I would say. But and now his son is running stuff. But Soros is also a more modern version of those guys, and they've gone to and they've gone to foundations, right, nonprofits, more and more. And instead, what the intelligence agencies used to do, you know, they always used the USAID and they always used the missionaries in certain aspects, but now it's almost like the intelligence organizations, they figured out that instead of allowing a Black Panthers movement to occur or allowing an American Indian movement to occur, you 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 create the group. You don't wait. You create. So they created Black Lives Matter. That was Soros funded, right? And it's administered by a woman named last name Khan, Khan. So it's a fake race war based group pushing the trans agenda as well that doesn't get at the root of the problem, which is the bloodline, which is the class aspect, like these super billionaires versus us. Okay, that's reality, people. And the right wingers are going to disagree with me this all day long. I don't care. That's what I love debating them. But it's a class war, and it's a class war from the bloodline on us, and it has been, in my estimation, for 8,500 years. So the only answer is when are we going to fight back? It's not about, you can't redistribute their wealth. Wait a minute. They redistributed our wealth already. They stole everything. They stole our land, even everybody's land. Everybody's land has been stolen. You realize that? How many people live on a farm anymore in the country on a little bit of acreage? How many Indian tribes live where they used to live? No, they put them on to desert places where there's no resources. And same with the, indigenous people, the Aborigines in Australia, and same everywhere. Useless pieces of land that they can't use. That's where they pushed all the native people. And now they're taking more and more of the white people's land through BlackRock and BlackRock's buying houses in this country. They're renting them out or they're turning them into Airbnbs, brand new houses, and it's just inflating the housing market, inflating the rent market, just squeezing people, you know. And so more and more people are renting, not buying, especially in the UK now. The dramatic rise in the number of people who are renting their houses, don't even own a house anymore. At least for 2 generations or maybe 3 people, own their houses, right? I owned houses and made some money by fixing a couple up and moving on, and you can't do that anymore. I mean, if you're a young person now, you can't do that. So they're closing off. They're continuing, in other words, to steal or redistribute our resources to them. 2008, look what happened. Bank of America bought most of those properties back that they went belly up on, or Wells Fargo or somebody on the courthouse steps in cities all over this country. So the big housing crash, farm out the mortgage-backed securities to Goldman Sachs, who farmed it out to small people, little people, and then crash, and then the big banks come in and buy the houses again for pennies on the dollar. See how it works? So controlled demolition, and that's how they do the economy. They'll at some point they'll crash it, but they'll have already sold their stuff. Then they come back in and buy it cheap and do it again. It's all speculation. But on the intelligence agencies, now one interesting thing I want to mention is the intelligence agencies really originated with the Empire Press Union, and Empire Press Union was something that was started by this Pilgrim Society, this roundtabler bunch that that Coleman talks about, really focuses on in his book, in fact, on how powerful they were. And they started this Empire Press Union in Britain. And so out of the Empire Press Union, it was all the bloodline, and their lieutenants and their and they became pretty much, that's where the recruitment was done for MI6, for MI5, for the CIA. Because if you think about media and intelligence, there's a lot of overlap, and especially if you understand the mind control aspect. I mean, the media, you look at Anderson Cooper, he's a Vanderbilt, right? You look at Nora O'Donnell, that's Larry O'Donnell's girl. She's the CBS News gal nowadays. You look at Margaret Brennan, and that's John Brennan's daughter, I believe, and he's the former CIA director. So it's always been said that with the Council on Foreign Relations, and thus with the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which controls them, so the smart guys become intelligence aid. Smart guys become the bankers of the bloodline. The sort of smart guys become the intelligence agents, part of it, because the CIA and the banks work together, and we're seeing that now with this cyber reason exercise, where they're trying to create this false flag for a possible cyber attack in the U.S. And these Israeli firms are contracting it, just like Serco contracts for the Crown over our military and the Five Eyes Alliance, and they know everything about everything. And so now we're seeing this again. But all these agencies started at the same time too. So 1945, I think the MI6, then 46, the MI5, then 47, the CIA. So they were all hatched at the same RI, Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House. They were all, that's where they did it. So the CIA doesn't work for the United States citizens. Again, it works for the Crown and its corporate tentacles and banking tentacles in every country of the world, the multinational corporations, right? So that I just want to point that out, and how interesting that is between the media and the intelligence agencies, how there's such a close link historically there always was, actually came out of it, and there still is. You'd be shocked at how many anchors and how many reporters in this country are actually on CIA payroll. I think people would be shocked. They found out in the church committee that it was already like astronomical number, and that was in 76, the church committee, Frank Church. Project Mockingbird. Yeah. Mockingbird. Just tell them what you want. So the AP and Reuters, by the way, Reuters is also controlled by, that's a bloodline thing. So the news services, right? Oh, that's rich. The news services. So you're going to tell us what the news is today. I see. That's up to you, huh? So, Reuters just read bloodline. Just here's what you talk about today. And they send it to everybody. And the Associated Press, and they send it to everybody. And then they all just Mockingbird it for the American people, for our consumption. And it's lies. It's 180 degrees from the truth. If you watch network news, I mean, you literally have to turn it on its head and go, oh, that's the opposite of that. Oh, that's the opposite of that. I see. And then you got it. So it's horrible. And it's a huge part of the mind control, obviously. The TV news, and just TV, especially still. And that's Edward Bernays, and that's, another Crown guy, RCA Corporation, another Crown Corporation, television. The advent of television also saw the outbreak of the Asian flu, just like the sonar was the Spanish flu. In the 40s, the TV came out, and there was this Asian flu epidemic across the U.S. My mom had it at Presentation College in South Dakota. She was in a coma for a while, and I didn't even realize it till years later. And then I connected that when it happened to her with the advent of television, and there it was. So that advent also made people sick, just like the 5G is making us sick. And that's why I think that's what COVID is. It's a cover operation for 5G rollout because they knew it'd make people sick and they'd have to come up with something. I can't breathe. Yeah, that's because oxygen's not, absorbing into your body at 60 gigahertz, the same exact speed as 5G operates. So now your body thinks 5G is oxygen and you're not getting enough. Yeah, I can't breathe, all these respiratory things. So a little bit take on that. But it's all just so controlled. That's I think that's what's hard for people to realize is just to break your whole mindset, your whole thing has to change about perceptions and about how you think about things and everything you say. Be careful too, and make sure you really mean to say that because words matter. Bible says God sang the world, talked the world into existence. So sound matters. It is all about frequencies, plasma, energy, good vibes, bad vibes. It's all about that. That's the nature of reality. And everything's a circle and it reciprocates. And if you reciprocate, you have a good life. If you reciprocate and if you have relationships and if you are just have good relationships with not just people, not just your family, not just extended family, not just but with everybody and everything and every rock and every tree and every animal and just try to be the good vibes, man. It's pretty simple. Then you don't got to worry about trying to find these protons and neutrons, making bombs out of it. Because who cares? It's just stupid. I mean, these people are really stupid, honestly. Regis, these people are so stupid. This bloodline, and this is a problem too because some of them really believe this stuff. Like, ooh, yeah, really on something here.
All right. So,
Mike
Dean,
was right.
the next time I want to relate a lot of this to what's been happening in the United States of America that everybody will be able to recognize, if not relate to. For example, how mind control has been used here over the last number of decades. Who's been doing it? It's got everything to do, as you mentioned, with Hollywood, with the news, all of that. I also want to look at what's been happening in America, and I just alluded to, for example, why and how Kennedy got whacked, and how Nixon, he didn't get whacked, but he got run out of office. And then I want to talk about the roles of Kissinger and Brzezinski and how profoundly they have changed not only this country, but the world. You okay with that?
Yeah, perfect, man. Looking
All right,
forward to
Dean,
it.
thanks so much. Always great to have you. We've got to do it again next week.
Right on, Regis. Thanks for having me, brother, and rock on.